So, yep. Yeah, we're excited. So, and we're live here. So, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good day, wherever the heck you are, whatever the heck you're doing. I am just delighted that you are here with me today. Today, I get to talk to my pal, Dr. Nick Morgan. Nick is a freaking genius. I've known Nick for a long, long time. He is one of America's top communications thinkers, theorists, and coaches. He's a passionate teacher committed to helping people find clarity in their thinking and ideas and then delivering them with panache. He's worked with the Fortune 50 to write for CEOs and presidents, coach people to give congressional testimony, appear in the media, and to deliver unforgettable TED Talks. His acclaimed book on public speaking, Give Your Speech, Change the World, How to Move Your Audience to Action, was published by Harvard in 2003 and reprinted in 2005. Then he wrote a book on authentic communications called Trust Me with Josie Bass in 2009. He wrote Power Cues in 2014. And this book, Can You Hear Me? How to Connect with People in a Virtual World on the Perils of Virtual Communication, is his best work yet. And I am just honored that he's going to spend some time with us today. So good morning, Nick. It's good to see you, buddy.
Phil, it's great to see you again. Like we were saying before we went live, it's just excellent to be able to connect once again.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I mean, a lot has changed since 2007, 2008, when we met with 800 CEO Reed. So, Nick, catch us up, man. What have you been working on before we get into the book? Like, what's keeping you up at night? How you serving clients?
So, my fascination, my passion, really is to bring in the neuroscience of communication, because there's just been this explosion in our understanding of the brain. And of course, that comes with a caveat that it's also very fast moving, and things we think we know today, we have to unlearn and relearn again. For the book, I was interviewing several neuroscientists, and one of them at the end of the call said, "Now, I want to say something off the record." So I said, "Okay, this sounds exciting after all this interesting information about the brain." And he said, "Okay, off the record, we know nothing about the brain." And what he meant by that was there's just still a lot of mystery left. And the brain, as people have famously noted, has more synapses in it than there are stars in the Milky Way. So it's an amazingly complex thing. We're just learning. But we've learned enough to get started and to help us figure out how to make communications work better. And so that's really my passion. And then, of course, I've been talking about that for a long time now, but in the last few years, the conversation changed. And when I talk to an audience, the first question during the Q&A would always be, "So, Nick, this body language, this neuroscience, really interesting, but if it's as important as you say, this face-to-face communication, actually I communicate with my team virtually. I never see them. Half of them are in India, the other half are in Singapore, and I got some here in California. How do I communicate with them? If face-to-face communication is as important as you say." So that's why I wrote the book, because I kept getting that question.
Yeah, it's a really important question, because it's very different. I mean, everybody would agree that if we can, we should go belly to belly, heart to heart, as much as we can. I mean, that's just an easier way. I can read your cues. I can pay attention to that. I can see in real time that you're moving and adapt my style. But digitally, especially, I mean, we're fortunate here that we have a rich medium of Zoom to record, but a lot of times it's not rich, or there's 17 people on the screen, and I can't possibly pay attention to everybody. Right. So, why is this maybe the same, and why is this different than what we had before?
Yeah, the thing that I found as I started to do the research for the book was really disturbing, and it's the first and most important thing that I discovered was just there's this big lack that happens in the virtual medium, whether we're talking about text-based communication or audio communication, and even video. And we should talk about how video has the same lack, and it's a lack of human feedback. What we humans care about is each other's intent. So as I talk to you, I want to know, how are you reacting and what's your intent toward me? We're hardwired to care about that immensely. And that intent comes through most powerfully, as you just alluded to, in body language. And so as soon as you start to narrow that pipeline and make it harder to get that information, then we humans do some funny things. We have we have empty channels. Think of the brain as a multi-channel receiver. It's always going out there saying, give me some information through my five senses. Tell me, what am I seeing, smelling, hearing, what tasting? And when I don't get those channels filled, what I do is make up the information, because I don't like to have empty channels. And here's the really interesting kicker, and this is why there's a problem in the virtual world. When I don't have the information and I make it up, in an evolutionary sense, it's better for me to assume something bad. It's better for me to be anxious. The humanoid walking through the jungle who's anxious is more likely to survive than the humanoid walking through the jungle who's all chilled out and says, hey, why should I worry about saber-toothed tigers? And so what we do is we fill up that information lack in the virtual world with the assumption of something negative. And just to give a simple example to make this concrete, in text-based messaging, we've all had this experience where we've typed out a quick reply, which we thought was perfectly clear, and maybe we threw a little joke in there, and for some reason, the other person gets offended. How could they be so stupid as to misunderstand our brilliant humor, right? And yet that happens all the time. And one bit of research I found, which was really fun, is that the further up you go in an organization, the shorter your email communications become. I guess just because you're busy and information overloaded, and so it actually can be a good strategy if you want to show that you're more powerful than you are by sending shorter and shorter email communications, right? Well, of course, the shorter they become, the more likely they are to be misunderstood. And that's the beginning of the problem in the virtual world. It's just that lack of feedback about human intent. And so if you get an email back from the boss, you send them some big piece of work or her some big piece of work, and you get back an email that one word says nice.
Whoa.
How do you react to that?
Yeah, not real good. Like nice. Oh boy, what does that mean?
What does that mean? Is that
really like
nice?
That?
Yeah, was that like nice, really nice, or nice sarcastic, or nice what? You know, and so what you do then is you spin your wheels and you spend the next hour to maybe week trying to figure out, what did the boss mean and how worried should I be? And this is exactly what I'm talking about. It's because we don't get a clear sense of intent. And the same thing happens in subtler ways in audio conferences, and then even in video conferences, as I say.
Interesting. So, okay, so if nice really isn't maybe something like that, I mean, I'm going to take the onus on my communications and send you an email, and I don't want it to be misunderstood. I don't want to just say nice. So maybe I type nice and then I put something around it. I mean, how do I make that more clear? How do I fill in those holes, Nick? Because that seems to be a lot of work just to make yourself more clear.
It is a lot of work, and the big promise of virtual communication beginning with email was it would be friction-free, if you remember the language of Silicon Valley, easier to send, unlike a letter, which you had to stamp and walk to the post office, right? Email became friction-free. And then it was going to be asynchronous, meaning I could send an email to you 6 o'clock in the night when I was wrapping up for the day, and you didn't have to read it till 10 o'clock the following morning with your morning coffee, right? And what happened instead of those two nice promises was we got information overload and 24/7 communication. So it's no longer good enough. And the result is I've got this immense to-do list in my email box, and I'm trying to keep up with it. So those are the problems, and that's the reason why, as you say, it feels like a lot of work. But it's work that we got to do, because the alternative is we're misunderstood, and then we spend 6 more emails trying to straighten it out, right? And what do you do about that? I mean, that's even more time wasted. So the first thing I say is there was a nice bit of research that found that if you put a complete sentence header in the subject line of your email that says, this is what you're going to get out of the email, rather than do what you and I and everybody does all the time, which is to say update or quick query or quick question or something like that, just a one-word heading, right? Because we're saving time, again. But that doesn't grab the reader, and it doesn't tell them what's in it for them. And so that's the first thing you can do, and it doesn't take all that much more time. Put in a declarative header that says, this is what you're going to get out of this email. And then the next thing I recommend is when you, once you've written the email, then put on your acting hat and read it out loud several different ways and see if it could be misunderstood. like that, like that nice example that we started with, right? You can say nice, and maybe people believe you. You can also say nice, and it sounds sarcastic, and you think, oh gosh, I don't want him to read it that way, or I don't want my email recipient to read it that way, so I better put in something else. And then the third thing that I recommend, and this is controversial, I get good and bad responses to this, is I recommend emojis. I think that it's time for the business world to suck it up and accept that millennial gift to the world and start using emojis in a big way, because it's simply it's a little on the crude side, simplistic, but it's a way to put emotional attitude in that gets left out of simple text messages. So those are a few ways. There's lots more in the book, but those are a few ways to get started. And they're not impossible, right? Those things aren't too hard to do.
No, well, so I wrote those down, right? So declarative header, okay, I get that. I can even do that at the end of my email. So I can skip ahead, right? I can then read it aloud. Okay, well, I can do that with the various acting voices. Nice! Or nice. So got that. And then I like emojis. I'm wondering, how do memes fit in that? How do animated GIFs fit in that? Is it the same on emoji, Nick, or is there more behind that? Is it only smartasses that share memes and GIFs, or what?
Well, I belong to a couple of Facebook groups that share GIFs all the time, and so I've come around to those. For me, it's another level of interpretation. I have to watch it and then figure out, now what the heck does this mean? What's the clever commentary? It's almost always humorous, right, is the point. And so it's having a bit of fun. I've got no problem with that. It's just whether you can stand the extra time involved and on both ends, right? You have to find your GIF and decide which one to use. And then the other person has to watch it. But sure, why not? I mean, I think we can all use a bit of fun in the world. And especially as seriously as we all take business now.
Yeah, well, I think that's the point. And that's one of the biggest points that I got out of your book, Nick, is that we don't take the time to be fun. Therefore, we're taken seriously when we aren't really maybe intending to be serious. And so adding emojis in, adding an animated GIF now and then, adding in even a little crude smiley face at the end is important. I also read a study actually that said that adding a period at the end of your text messages makes people angry because it makes it sound like it's final. Like this is the truth. You must do this. And I think that's so interesting that we read so much into things that a period, like for me, I put a period simply because I always put 2 spaces because I want to make sure I didn't have any typos to make sure that the spell check catches me.
Yeah.
But that's so interesting. So
yeah, I was talking to one neuroscientist about email, and he was saying, if you want to make sure your email gets through clearly, call up the other person and read the email to them over the phone. And I said, well, yeah, but that kind of defeats the purpose of email, doesn't it? Which is supposed to be free and asynchronous. And he says, but he said, think about it. We've had email now since 1971 was when DARPA first started sending emails around to universities and the military. And so that's 30, 50 years now. Yep. And he said, we've learned one thing in 50 years, in half a century, which is all caps means shouting. And I love
that's it.
Yeah, that's all we've learned. And we could, to that, we can add your period at the end of the sentence. It seems too final. Seems harsh. But the point is that both those things are negative interpretations of simple typographical changes, right? And that makes the point exactly that what we humans do, lacking the information because intent is not getting through clearly, is we go negative. We assume the worst. That's how we're wired, and so that's what we do. And so you can complain about that, but the better thing to do is to adapt and realize that that's what's going to happen, and forestall it by putting in something positive or making your intent clear.
Yeah, I think that's why we're seeing more video. That's why we're seeing more video email. That's why we're seeing a lot of these technologies come about. That's why Zoom is so important, because I can clearly see your intent if I'm watching you, or can I, Nick? I mean, you say in the book that there's struggles with this still. So what do we miss in video?
Yeah, so video is really interesting. You'd think it puts in the visual so I can see your happy smiling face and know that you're getting my message and I can see you reacting and all this. It's all good, right? No, not quite, sadly. One of the things that the brain does, which is really important to the unconscious mind, is it keeps very close track of where I am in space. This is you might call it a sixth sense. The neuroscientists are aware of, the rest of us don't think about very often because it's unconscious work our brain does. It's called proprioception, and it's our brain's effort to know exactly where we are in space all the time and also where anybody else around us is in space. So think about it. That's why for most people, going to a cocktail party is hard work, even if you're extroverted and enjoy it. What your brain is doing, in addition just to trying to talk to the people in front of you, your brain is doing a 360 scan all the time, much, much faster than you can possibly imagine, trying to keep track of where everybody's moving in space. And it does this for simple survival reasons. We need to know where the fight or flight, friend or foe humans are around us. Okay, so that's what the brain does face to face. You put that three-dimensional world onto a two-dimensional camera or two-dimensional screen. And what the brain does is, so what your brain and my brain is doing right now, is I'm looking at you and my brain's going, where the heck is Phil? How far away is he? I can't tell. I know there's somebody there, but I can't tell where he is in space because it's two-dimensional. And my brain can only cope with three, and you're doing the same thing. So our brains are whirring like one of those little dingbats on a computer when it can't figure out what's happening. And that's very tiring, and it also uses up a fair amount of brain space. And so the thing to understand is the neuroscientific phrase for this is cognitive load. It increases our cognitive load, right? We're working harder than we otherwise would be. And so it's not the same as face-to-face. It's harder work. And then my other favorite subtlety of this is that when there was a little bit of research done on tracking eye movements of people who were talking on video cameras, because I was curious to see where they looked. And where they spend most of the time, 60%, slightly more of the time looking, is at the little PIP of themselves on the video camera. Now, your first reaction, of course, is, oh, aren't we vain? And you could think that, but really that's the brain trying to figure out where I am in space because I'm seeing myself up there. Isn't that weird? And so that it causes my brain again to go into high gear trying to figure out where I am in space because that little two-dimensional picture means nothing to my three-dimensional brain. And I tell people it would be as if, so you're in a face-to-face traditional meeting room, right, having your team meeting. It would be as if everybody had little mirrors and they kept looking at themselves in the little mirrors. They sat there talking to other people. You know, how weird would that be, right? But that's what we do on a video camera. So our attention is split between ourselves, and not just for vanity, as I say, it's because our brains genuinely want to know where we are, and then the other person. So you add those things up, and you alluded to even worse situation where there are many little pictures on the screen because you got 12 people on the video conference, and that's even more work because you certainly can't keep track of where those 12 people are, and as you say, just trying to get the visual expressions of 12 people is really hard. So you add all that up, and video conferencing feels like hard work to people, and so one of the key messages I start with in the book is give people breaks. Don't run too long on the video conferencing. And we tend to schedule them for an hour because that's how we've always scheduled things, for an hour.
Wow.
It's too long.
Yeah.
That's generals fighting the last war, as the old saying goes, right? We're still scheduling in the virtual world where attention spans are shorter as if we were face to face. And so we schedule a team audio meeting for an hour when nobody can survive an hour on an audio conference without doing something else. When I ask audiences, how many of you spend a lot of your working life on team audio conferences? 100% of the hands go up. And then I say, now be honest, how many of you, as soon as you get on one of those team audio conferences, start doing something else, put it on mute and start doing email? And you know what? 99% of the hands go up. And I'll say to them, That's amazing when you think about it, because if you were face to face, how would it be if you brought your computer in and sat there and just started doing email?
Hold on. I got to respond to somebody, Nick.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excuse me just a minute. Yeah. I mean, it would be, it's rude enough people do the surreptitious thing where they kind of hold their cell phone down below the table and take a sneak.
Or they've got the Dick Tracy watch on, right?
Yeah, that's right. And they do the occasional.
Hold on. Yeah. Oh, was that person more important than Nick? Nope.
Yeah,
What about this one? Yep.
Yeah. Oh, that's the president calling. I better take that call. Yeah. So, so we play those kind of games, and those are bad enough. But on audio conferencing, it's virtually 100% of people. I think the actual number is in the high 80s. But when I ask people, everybody raises their hand. They're trying to multitask. They're doing their email. They're trying to keep up with their to-do list, whatever it is they're doing. They're doing online shopping. They're exercising. And in fact, when I was doing research for the book, I delved into the sort of most horrific stories of what people were doing while they were on audio conferencing. Yeah, and the favorite one, I mean, there are obviously some fairly scatological ones that I won't repeat, but my favorite one was the two teams in Brazil that were in big countries, so different parts of different states in Brazil, and one of the teams suffered an earthquake while the audio conference was going on. And the other team just kept talking away because everybody was on mute. Nobody knew. So audio conferencing is so boring.
Oh my gosh.
Even an earthquake can't wake it up, which I just love.
Well, how do we fix that, Nick? I mean, come on, man. I mean, that sucks, right? I'd love to get more involvement and more of that. I mean, for me, when I do these interviews, one of the reasons, to your point about why I like to do them on video, is because now I can look at you and I don't actually have to look at me. So I actually get somebody else to fixate on, which makes sure that I'm present in the moment. Because like everybody else, right, I got 100 things I could be doing. Yeah. And so this gives me an opportunity for 40 minutes, an hour, however long, typically not super long, because to your point, I know my attention span is short, so I expect others are. So shorter meetings, video actually teach people maybe to look at the other person that's speaking. I mean, what else do we got here, Nick?
Yeah, so on audio conferences especially, you need to assign somebody to be the MC. And the MC's job is to keep track of how much other people are participating, because MIT did some research on this, and they found that if you have an ongoing audio conference where there's one person who does all the talking or a couple of people who do all the talking, the team is less cohesive and less productive. If everybody communicates roughly the same amount, the team is more cohesive and more productive. So that says your job, if you're the team leader or if you're the MC, is to get people communicating by hook or by crook. And so what I suggest is plan the audio conference carefully in 10-minute chunks and make sure every 10 minutes you get group input. And you tell people that you're going to do this, because one other little bit of research was kind of fun. This was done in a university setting. Not surprisingly, it turned out people are less likely to multitask, pay attention better, and learn more from or retain more of what's said on an audio conference if you tell them there'll be a test at the end. You probably can't do this with your colleagues, but if you tell them, all right, in this segment, we're going to talk for about 10 minutes. Somebody's going to present this or that. We've got some things to go over. And then at the end, we'll go around and get everybody's reaction. And so I think that getting that rhythm going, of 8 minutes talk, 2 minutes of sharing is a very important one.
No, I like that. And I will tell you that I think that's where all video conferences is going, whether it's a show like this. So it's not just, you talking for 26 minutes. It's got to be interrupted with some feedback. It's got to be interrupted with some of that so that we have a pattern break. Because otherwise, to your point, it's that I work hard to make sure the camera angles change, make sure sometimes it's just on you, sometimes just on me, make sure that I provide that feedback. So so that MC where everyone communicates, I think that's definitely a workable thing, because we already have if you will, a note taker. And then we just kind of flip that over. And instead of saying a note taker, maybe we have an interaction maker. Yeah. That's the other person. So
yeah. Cool. Think of it as providing the body language read, if you will, that would happen naturally in a face-to-face meeting, but doesn't happen in the virtual space. You need to have somebody taking care of sort of the virtual body language, and that's just waking everybody up, making sure they're engaged, checking out if they're silent for a long period of time, what's going on. The other thing I recommend, and this is especially for teams that are meeting on an ongoing basis, work teams, is you begin every meeting with a quick check-in that goes as follows. Everybody gets to say red, yellow, or green, where red means I'm facing disaster, I really shouldn't even be on this call. Yellow means I'm having my normal stressed out crappy day, and green means everything's good, surprise, surprise. And the advantage of that is it's coded, so the participants know it's coming, so they don't have to wonder, is it appropriate if I bring up this particular problem? You know, I've got a sick child or something like that, and I really shouldn't be here. That kind of thing is hard enough to do in person, especially if you feel pressure from the boss to perform in certain ways. But it's almost impossible to do on an audio conference because you feel uncertain as to whether it's appropriate to share that kind of off-topic emotional reality with the people on the call. And so the red, yellow, green allows you to do that very simply and quickly. Excuse me. And then the MC or the team leader, if there's call for it, can check in with the person who said red and say, oh, sorry, it sounds like you're having a crap day. Do you want to get off the call or follow up afterwards on another call and say, I'll check in with you one-on-one and we'll see what's going on. So that it just allows you to introduce that in a way that's very low stress and gets natural. And I suggest doing it also, again, at the end of the call, because then you can kind of monitor the mood changes. And they're working on AI software that will enable you to do that automatically, get people just to vote.
Yeah. No, well, that makes so much sense to check in. And I think the key part of that is to actually care about the other person so that you do that follow-up, not just check in. Oh, hey, Nick, that sucks, man. You're having a red day? Cool. Yeah. So what's your update again?
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Talk to me, turkey, right? Like that's horrible. And yet, you know, I think we have grown so accustomed to asking the question and checking the box that says we asked the question and not really caring enough about the answer.
Yeah, that's key. Yeah, if you're not really going to care about the answer, then it's not smart to ask the question, because it's almost worse. To pretend to care, because people figure out that. Yeah,
well, after a couple times of ignoring them, they're going to probably look for a new job.
Yeah.
So that's what's going to happen. So okay, so we have we got a few minutes here. Let's talk about the impact on presenters, though, because a lot of the folks I know listening, watching, are folks that do presentations, that might deliver keynotes or training or breakouts or whatever the heck you want to call it via these tools. So the tips that you gave certainly will work. The interaction time, the 8 minutes of talk to 2 minutes of interaction that we can get people going, maybe have an MC, things like that. But are there any other, maybe one or two other tips, Nick, that we can give for the speakers and the trainers out there that are like, okay, we talked about corporately. How do we do that as a trainer or a speaker?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as you know, because you've followed me over the years, I have an ongoing debate with the world about whether PowerPoint's a good idea or not, and I'm not a big fan of PowerPoint unless, and there are exceptions there, and we don't need to get that discussion today, but there are plenty of people who use PowerPoint well, and it adds to the presentation. I get that, I accept that, but on the whole, I always start with the presumption we're not going to use PowerPoint unless there's some good reason for it, right? But in the virtual setting, then I'm a strong believer in PowerPoint. More than that, I'm a strong believer in prepared videos, lots of things to break up that feed. And you made this point earlier, like you do with the Facebook Live, trying to change the camera angles and things like that. The static idea of guys standing, excuse me, even if he's on video. If he's not, if it's just audio, it's much worse. But a guy talking or gal talking for 45 minutes and then saying, anybody still alive for Q&A, it's just disaster. And you can get away with that in person because there's a lot more going on. But on a webinar, I mean, I've heard so many webinars where that's literally the case. We're going to talk for 45 minutes here, and it's just sound. And then at the end of that, we're going to say any questions. And then we wonder why there's no questions.
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet so many think that it is a lecture though. So I've delivered some of those where people, they're almost shocked that I actually want interaction. I try to start at the beginning, right? I start a few minutes early. I'll go a few minutes late, and in between, I'll try to, I have those breaks spaced in for that interaction. And I get feedback like, I wish you would stop asking me to participate. I wish he'd just share his material. Well, if you just want my material, seriously, I'll just record an audio for you. You can put it in your brain. That's not helping you. You're not retaining anything. There's no transformation there that happens. So how do we, as we kind of wrap this up, Nick, how do we really encourage this to happen even more? Do you got one more study or one great story that's going to illustrate this and drive us home?
Yeah. So I think that the key there to understand is that it's a chase to the bottom. It's a lowest common denominator thing. If you say to people, okay, you can just turn on this webinar and you're going to get continuing work credits or something like that to speak to the training people, then sure, people are going to complain if they have to do work because that's more for them, right? Otherwise, they just got the thing droning on in the background and they're multitasking. They're doing their email. Well, I'm sorry, that's not good enough, to your point, if you want people to actually learn anything. And so we do have the right to demand a little more of them. And you should tell them that up front, as I know you do, so that they're warned. And if that's really just too awful for them, they can opt out, and so much the better. But yeah, I mean, I think the key question to ask, and this is how I would wrap up for anything in the virtual world, ask yourself, and then if you don't know the answer, ask the other people, is how did what I just say make you feel? Because in other words, I want to know your intent, your response to what I just said. That's what doesn't come through in the virtual world as well as it does face-to-face, where I can see the look in your eye, can see your body language reacting. And so if you don't know the answer to that, so I ask myself, how did what I just say made Phil feel? If I don't know the answer, then I'll ask you out loud. And that does two things. First of all, it allows me to find out how you feel. And second, it shows you the respect that I'm going to take the time and show the caring to actually ask, how do you feel about this? And I think in a information overloaded, increasingly fast-paced world, that respect, that showing that you care by taking that time is important. And so I think it's not a complicated question, but it's an important one, and it requires caring and time, two things in very short supply these days. But I think that's how we're going to make the virtual world a better communications medium.
Yeah, I agree. We have to ask the question about how does it make you feel, and then give a crap about the answer and be willing to dialogue a little bit about that to make sure, right? We don't want to check the box. I always say that, Nick, because sometimes people forget that, right? They hear that and then they check the box. So, well, I asked Nick how he feels. That's great. Okay, now I'm done. What's next? Right. So don't let that end. Folks, the book is Can You Hear Me Now? If you don't have a copy of it, it's fantastic. This is Dr. Nick Morgan, who's with us today, sharing a little bit about how to connect with people in a virtual world. If you want to get more from Nick, you go to drnickmorgan.com. His work is at publicwords.com. And Nick, if people want to interact with you, maybe have some questions about what they learned today, where would you have them go? Are you LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook? Where do you want them to be?
All the above. LinkedIn is great. You can email me directly. You can go to the website, Public Words. There's a contact form there, nick@publicwords.com. I'm very good at responding to email like everybody else. It's my to-do list. So you send it to me, it'll go on the to-do list and I'll do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nick. I know I learned a lot today. There's so much that we can do to make things better. Start asking people, how do they feel as a result of the information? Really give a crap about their answer, and then spend some time with them. Your world will be better, you'll communicate more, and you'll have more fun. Thanks so much.